welcome to episode 16 of Rainbow Table. My name is Deb Pierce, and I'm going to be your host for the next 29 and a half minutes. And today we are tackling the very light subjects of religion and human rights and how they play a part with each other, and how we've made some great strides over the years for combating some of that. I'm just seeing in the chat here, both of our guests are here now, and I'm grateful for that. So a little preamble to this is that if you haven't joined our Rainbow Table Facebook group, please do so. You're in the good company of 916 other folks. It's a great place to exchange ideas, coffee talks, book groups, what are they called? Studies? I don't know. Anyway, I'm excited to be here, and I can't wait to talk to you about some of the things that are going on to my guests. So you can watch this on YouTube Live. You can watch it on Facebook. You can watch the 15 previous episodes that we've shot at agal.ca/Rainbow Table. Agal.ca is also a great website with a plethora of information. So feel free to check that out anytime. Thank you so much for being here. We're going to bring on our first guest today, and I'm going to read you a little bit about this human who I call friend. Reverend Brent Hawks, CM, is the founder and executive director of Rainbow Faith and Freedom and senior pastor emeritus of the MCC of T, Metropolitan Community Church of Toronto, where he was there for over 40 years, from 1977 to 2018. And he was at the forefront of ministry for the 2S LGBTQI communities and has helped thousands of folks and their families come back into a spiritual relationship with God. I know as a community, as queer folks, we sort of have had maybe an adverse experience with religion. So let's, without further ado, invite one of our first of two guests on, Reverend Brent Hawks. Hi, your bio is so long and you're so accomplished, and I'm grateful that you're here today. I know you've got meetings after this, so this show's going to be about a half an hour long between you and our second guest, Farouk. So without further ado, I want to talk to you about why I wanted to choose this particular topic in July. And it was inspired by the fact that in July of 2005, even though you did it 4 years earlier, the Civil Marriage Act came into effect on July 20th, 2005, as Chapter 33 of the Statutes of Canada. However, you were ahead of that curve and were performing marriages before that 4 years earlier. Can you take us back to that day, that moment? Because we're really talking about human rights and religion and how they play parts together. Let's talk about that day and maybe days and years leading up to that, Brent.
Sure. There were a number of LGBT couples who tried to get a license to get married at City Hall and were denied that opportunity. In Ontario, there's two ways to get married. You can get married through the traditional way. You can get married through the license, go to City Hall and get the license. That's the way most people get married today. Or you can get married by the publication of the banns, which is a more ancient way where you go to a rabbi, an imam, a pastor, and ask them to marry you. And if they agree, then they publish the banns or announce it for 3 weeks. And if there's no objections, then they officiate at the wedding and issue the license. And under that section of the act, it said any two persons and never said male and female. So we announced on Human Rights Day, December of 2000, that we would marry couples on 2011. We read the banns. There were no legal objections. I had to rule, which was very powerful, that they weren't legal objections, because they weren't. What the Bible says is not a legal objection, or doesn't say. Whoopsie daisy, sorry. And so that first day, that day approached, and there were objections. There were death threats. It was crazy, scary, crazy exciting. I called my family the night before to say, I love you if anything happens. That morning, John and I were picked up at our home by some bodyguards, took us to the church, a roundabout route in case anybody was waiting on the way to do anything. And we were rushed into the church. But I felt very safe because there were 12 bodyguards protecting me, 11 of the toughest looking lesbians you've ever seen in your life, and one gay man kind of coordinating it all. And
that's a great visual.
And there were 50 police officers in the church. We let our guard down, though, that morning at the regular 9 o'clock, 11 o'clock services, because the weddings were in the afternoon. We thought that would be the focus. And in the middle of the 11 o'clock service, a woman came up and assaulted me. So that raised our fears even more about the afternoon weddings.
Physically or verbally or both?
No, physically and verbally. Yeah, she came to the front of the church and was throwing anti-gay pamphlets, and I went over to her very calmly like this, hands out to the side, talked to her. She knocked me over. And she was eventually arrested and charged with assault and found guilty. And so 1,000 people came. They all had to be searched. I had to walk through a corridor of police officers to get into the sanctuary. The place erupted in applause. It was exciting and scary. The weddings proceeded without any incident, even though there were protesters outside. There were 80 media outlets there from around the world. And it was amazing. So at the end of the service, I issued the license and proclaimed them married. The conservative government of the day refused to recognize them, refused to register the marriages. So we took them to court, and we asked our court case to be joined together with a court case for other couples who had been trying to get legally married. And they joined the court cases together, and we won the court case. But that was the judge ruled that the governments had 2 years to change the law because of complications. So that was appealed by the governments, the federal and provincial governments, and we won the appeal case. And when we won the appeal case in 2003, the judges ordered that it be immediate and that it be backdated 2 years to include our weddings. And so that's what made those weddings on January the 14th, the first in Canada, and we believe in modern history in the world.
I think so, absolutely. And so 2 things pop into mind. True or false, urban legend has it that you were wearing a bulletproof vest that day.
That was true. Absolutely true. I had the bulletproof vest from numerous death threats over the years around Pride, usually. Sometimes people thought I had gained weight for Pride. No, it was the bulletproof vest. It's very bulky. This certainly did not present me at my best. But
safest and so weird. I can't imagine. And so, because today we're going to speak with you and Farouk about religion and how that plays a part in human rights. So marriage to whomever you love is it's a basic human right. And so where do you think those laws are? And this is sort of a personal, professional question. Where do you think those laws maybe hide behind religion as a basis for that type of discrimination? Not to put thoughts or words into your head, but when we spoke earlier this week about speaking today, that did come up.
Yeah, I think sometimes some political actions hide behind or manipulate religion, but I'm not going to let religion off the hook, because activists all over the world say that religious-based discrimination, and I really want to make the point here that it's not that religion is the problem, because there are many religious leaders that are very supportive of a variety of human rights issues, including LGBT rights. It's religious-based discrimination and religious-based homophobia that are the problems. And those are the problems all over the world. And so, and it's understandable when you think about it. I mean, most religions are relying on ancient documents written thousands of years ago. If our medical profession did that, or our legal profession did that, they'd be as screwed up sometimes as religions are, right? And so that's a challenge when we use those ancient documents as rule books instead of history books.
Yes, and certain folks preaching to the choir. I've never said that expression to you, but that feels really funny to me right now. But they do sort of hide behind certain aspects of that book, if you will, or those books. And they certainly don't, they wouldn't think twice about wearing, I think, purple on Sundays or something. I don't really know. I can't really quote I haven't studied it like you have.
Yeah, there are many, many things in the Christian scriptures and the Hebrew scriptures, and I would assume in the Quran and other scriptures. There are many things that none of our faiths would follow today. I mean, in the Christian and Hebrew scriptures, it says women who wear red are to be condemned. Women who commit adultery are to be stoned to death. Adolescents who are misbehaving continually are to be taken to the edge of the field and stoned to death. You can't eat rabbit. You can't eat shellfish. All of these things are there.
Picking and choosing specifically for that.
Yep.
Well, I'm going to put you in the green room for a second. And when we come back after our next guest, I want to talk to you about BLC6 and conversion therapy. And I want to talk about religion's part in that, if we could. If you could just stick with us for a moment. We're going to bring our second guest on. Very excited to have him here. And I'm just going to read Farouk Kaki is a Tanzanian-born Canadian who's a refugee and immigration lawyer, human rights activist, has speaked on issues including gender equality, sexual orientation, and progressive Islam. And their bio is so long and beautiful and detailed and accomplished. A few more things that we spoke about, and is a new parent, actually, which is really, really exciting. And started the Unity Mosque in 2009. It's an inclusive healing space, and was previously a student at Emmanuel College's Master's in Pastoral Counseling. So he is ordained as a reverend as well and officiates marriages for all orientations. You don't need to see my face, just my face anymore. Let's bring our next guest on. Here is Farouk Kaki. Welcome.
Hey, how you doing?
I'm so good. It's nice of you to be here with us today. Thank you so much. You've probably been sitting here listening to me speak with Reverend Brent Hawks. So one of the things that I want to speak with both of you about is going to be similar. And then again, as I mentioned, we're going to come back and all three of us are going to talk about Bill C6, conversion therapy, and the role of religion in that. So knowing that the topic today on Rainbow Table is human rights and religion, and how religions have played different roles in that. What is your first response to that, and how maybe folks have been able to get away with certain levels of discrimination, being able to hide behind those scriptures or those writings?
That's a loaded question, right? So
yes, it is.
Which is my entry point. I think religion, like anything else, is something that can be used and manipulated. As a person of faith or people of faith will talk about how the spirit or whatever it is in their tradition, whatever words they use, breathes life into them or breathes energy into them. But the reality is that we also breathe life into whatever ideology or belief system that we are tapping into, right? So I've met very non-religious Muslim folk who all of a sudden are using religion to justify their homophobia or their transphobia. And I'm like, but your religion and anything else, why now is it an important issue, right? Coming back to what Jesus says, who is sinless. I don't consider my sexual orientation to be a sin, just to be clear. But I think the problem with religion, or the issue with religion, one of the issues is how it can be used and manipulated. Within the Muslim context, I often talk about how in Islam, God is known through the 99 most beautiful names. But those 99 names go from the creator to the destroyer, to the beloved, to the chastiser. So I think we can choose our God. And I think while we're all made in God's image, we make God in our image. And I think that's the problem with religion, is when we start making our creator in our own image with our own prejudices. And I think religion has potentially a structure that allows manipulation like that.
And you're going to see what you want to see, and you're going to hear what you want to hear, for better or for worse, right?
Exactly.
And so because it's so layered, the levels of academia, the layers of how you represent different religions, and we talked about how you're ordained to marry folks. So if you're looking to get married, I mean, reach out. So are there any specific moments where you can see that we've really turned a corner for where you work within your belief system and moving forward? We spoke with Reverend Brent Hawks about how the Civil Marriage Act and doing all that moved forward, and now it's known as a basic human right and honored that way. Is there anything that you can sort of think of where you've seen us turn a corner for progression?
So I was in the green room listening, and I was listening to Brent, speak about his experiences and the leather, the bulletproof vest, and
I like the leather too, though. He's probably laughing right now.
Probably.
I wish we could bring him on because you know he's laughing, but go on.
So, but I'm also reflecting because, you know, I often get asked, well, how can you be Muslim and be gay, and it must be this way and this way. We forget how recent this history is in Canada, in Toronto. It's this century. It's not that far away, right? And at the same time, we've also, as a Canadian society, we've made a huge stride since 1969 to the present time in terms of LGBT stuff, not around Indigenous stuff, not around even gender stuff, and so on. White women still make only 72 cents on the white male dollar, right? So I think our turning our corners, I think there are many corners. This is a corner that Brent was speaking about, is one of those corners that is monumental, not just for Canada, but I think for around the world. You know, I do refugee and immigration work. The majority of my clients are queer and trans folk. I've represented folks from 120 different countries. What they see in Canada is inspirational for them. The conversations we have around anti-Black racism, around gender and trans issues and exclusion, those are the conversations we must have to have a healthy society, and we must continue to have those, right? What corners? From the Muslim context, one of the encouragements is the interface that happens between Muslim peoples in Canada with the larger society, and with that, hopefully a shift in perspective and in attitude, and a movement towards an Islam not hindered by gender bias, because I think the exclusion of queers is actually an issue around gender, but that's another conversation. So, and I think for Muslims, that's an issue that they have to contend with before they can fully grapple with the issue of sexual orientation.
And before we bring Brent back so that we can talk about something that he presented with you with a few years ago, and then we'll talk about conversion therapy. When we spoke the other day and we had our pre-interview, I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I think you were talking to somebody who was going to be converting
yes,
faiths. Can we talk about what that looks like in case people want to find something other than themselves and maybe looking to your faith?
So I always ask people's motivations as to why they're choosing to do this. Some of the folks that come to the Unity Mosque have already come into Islam or were born into Islam, but are looking for a more healing or a more reflective space, because we're a gender equal space and so on. Conversion to Islam is really simple. It's the declaration of faith. There is no God but God, and Muhammad is a messenger and prophet of God. And Muslims are taught to believe in all the prophets, including all the Hebrew and biblical prophets, and then some of whom are named in the Quran and most of whom are not. That also provides the thread of sort of inclusion, right? So when people want to come into Islam and they come to me, I always want to ask them what their motivation is. And sometimes a relationship is a motivation. And sometimes folks come into that relationship with Islam through a relationship that no longer exists. My congregation is gender and orientation and a lot of the non-queer and non-trans folks come to our mosque because it is queer and trans inclusive. And that's a great shift. So the path to Islam is just that declaration. And it's an easy path. It's an easy phrase to say. What it means is that you accept the divine into your life, and that you have to accept all the prophets, including Jesus, including Moses, including all the prophets of the Hebrew Bible. In this particular
I think it's
case,
wonderful for people, because to personalize it, growing up Catholic, as soon as I started to listen, I just realized it really wasn't for me. And so have I found my own spirituality? Yes. Would I say I'm a person of faith? I don't know that I'm there, but there's something for everybody, and leading with love is the first way to get there, right?
Yeah, leading with love is the first way to get there. And, many things are spiritual. We categorize things as being sacred and profane, but I don't see the world in that kind of binary. Just as gender is not necessarily a binary, neither is that. And offering a gift to a homeless person, or offering food to a homeless person, or a glass of water, is also something spiritual. Hugging a tree or sticking your toes in the sand at the beach is also spiritual. It is also about creating a connection with something larger than yourself. That's where the spirit lies, regardless of how you conceptualize it. Begin there.
I love that. If I went back to my 8-year-old self, things may have been different in my headspace around that. Waiting patiently in the wings is Reverend Brent Hawkes. Let's bring Brent back on, and we're going to finish up in the next couple of moments talking about conversion therapy. And I'm just going to read a little something here that you were honored at the 2000, Farouk, you were honored at the 2006 Pride Week Gala for your role in promoting queer Muslim awareness through Salam. Reverend Brent Hawkes of the Toronto Metropolitan Community Church said of you that day, "I think Salam is very important, both locally and internationally, in terms of creating a safe space for people of Muslim tradition to be able to come together both socially and spiritually." So the two of you know each other.
Yep.
Not
Yes.
surprisingly. Okay.
We've danced together.
Okay. Now
And
I kind of
protest.
want to talk a little bit longer now. Okay. Well, so I just want to wrap up today because we're talking about human rights and religion, and I think I would be incredibly remiss if I didn't talk about Bill C-6. Now, Agal has an open letter to the Speaker of the Senate right now to demand a vote on Bill C-6 because, just to bring everyone up to speed, Bill C-6 bans many forms of conversion therapy, passed in the House of Commons. It passed on June 22nd. However, before it can be signed into law, it also has to be passed at the Senate. And so I want to talk about the hazards and challenges and deplorable situation that conversion therapy is. Brent, could you sort of speak to, for folks that don't know of it or don't know the details of it, could you speak to that?
Sure. Conversion therapy is an attempt, most often by folks of faith, religious people, to shift someone's sexual orientation and increasingly gender identity, gender expression, from what is natural and good and healthy and wholesome for them into some kind of heteronormativity that says that heterosexual is the only way to go and you need to change or can change, and the way to do it is to go through some kind of conversion therapy. There are many different forms of it. It's violent, it's coercive, it's child abuse, and it needs to end. And I'm really pleased that overwhelmingly the parliamentarians want it to end. They quibble on language. Well, get over the quibbling. And the Senate needs to pass it. It needs to be called back into session to pass it. Lives are at stake. And it's not just in terms of what's happening here in Canada. It's highly symbolic as well for what's going on around the world. So we need Canada to clearly make a statement on this. And, child abuse of any type is a criminal offense, and this is child abuse.
I muted myself. I hate that. I'm going to get a t-shirt that says you're on mute for everything from 2019 to 2021. Sorry. Thank you very much for that. El Farouk, just respectfully, do you have anything to add? I'm sure you do.
Well, just I want to riff off the comment about it's not just important for Canada; it's important for around the world, right? We got to put our money where our mouth is. We got to put our actions. It's no good having equal marriage if queer and trans kids are being tortured, because this is a form of torture, right? To have to deny who you are and what you are in order to conform to somebody else's ideal is a form of torture. And sometimes that process includes physical and sexual violence. So the torture is not just psychological or spiritual torture, it's also physical and sexual torture that sometimes goes along with it. So a law doesn't change what happens on the ground level, but it becomes a platform for us to be able to have conversations and to have safe conversations for ourselves and for the people who are advocating for those changes and for a better society for all of us. So,
And you know, when I was doing the research on it this week, a colleague sent me something from Saskatchewan. Muslim, Sikh, Christian, Jewish faith leaders in Regina are just this week signed a letter supporting the ban on conversion therapy. That was just July 14th. So, you know, I was talking to some neighbors about this, and cisgendered heterosexuals, they had no idea that this existed or exists, excuse me. They couldn't believe it. They were appalled. They were disgusted. What do I do? Where does it happen? Because it's really subversive, right? And then I said, you know, if you want to just have a bit of levity over an incredibly serious subject, watch But I'm a Cheerleader, which I don't know if either of you remember that, but it's RuPaul, and they have all these folks coming to this camp, yeah. And it really does turn the whole concept of the absurdity of conversion therapy on its ear. So we're just about out of time right now. So human rights and religion. Any final thoughts on this? I'll give it to Brett first, and then El Farouk, you can send us out.
Yeah, I would just say that, you know, the traditional way that our LGBT communities approach this is fighting religion. And the problem with that is it's alienating our allies, and it's underutilizing LGBT people of faith. And you know, the LGBT community needs to center LGBT people of faith in this struggle, because a religious attack requires a religious response. And LGBT people of faith can give that religious response.
Thank you. And thank you for being here. You just became such a lawyer. Just you were thinking about what you were going to say. And just in case you forgot it, I saw you writing it down. So El Farouk, the final word's going to you.
Yeah, I just wanted to comment that, you know, for some folks, like some, you know, when you talk about people being bewildered because it's coming to their attention, as a person of color, you know, we often experience this with white folk who are bewildered by the notion of racism or anti-Black racism or anti-Indigenous racism, or men who are oblivious to the marginalization of women and so on, even in our own society. I want to riff off what Brent said. Stop fighting religion, start fighting with religion as a tool, because in my context, I can't tell people who base their understanding on a religious framework to put that framework aside and to still celebrate and to embrace me. I actually have to speak their language, whatever that language is. And for some people, their language is religion. And so we have to be able to learn to speak that language. And for many of us as queer folk, our religion and our spirituality are also part of us. We shouldn't have to deny that part of us in order to celebrate the fullness of our humanity and our agency, right? So use the tools that are given to you in the universe, and that includes religion, in order to make the world a better place, because it's not the tools that make it, it's us who makes it or breaks it. So
beautiful, beautiful. I knew that when I asked you, and you both agreed right away to be on Rainbow Table, that this would be a great episode, and you did not disappoint. We just heard back from a viewer, Todd, saying thank you both for your decades of work in our community, and I couldn't close on a better note. So thank you so much. And that concludes episode 16 of Rainbow Table. If you want to go check out the other ones, you can on thegal.ca/Rainbow Table. You can join our Rainbow Table Facebook group. And I think that's about all the housekeeping notes. I haven't heard from my producer. Jonathan hasn't texted me, so it looks like we're good to go. And I will close off this show like I do in every show and tell you there's always a seat for you at our Rainbow Table. Take care.